All right, everyone. At this point, Joe Biden is one of the least popular Democratic nominees that they've ever had. Like usually there's considerably more enthusiasm. You'd think of Obama 2008, even Clinton to some extent. While she sort of fell flat with an element of the party, at least the business Democrats tacitly got aboard, those that didn't flee to Trump. And there was good reason for them to do so, by the way. Really, it was just the Bernie bros. But now Joe Biden, barely more than half of the people in the party want him to actually be the nominee. And keep in mind, technically speaking, he hasn't clinched. So many of the states pushed their primaries back in flagrant violation, by the way, of the DNC guidelines, the DNC and the RNC. And for years, this has been a problem because states try to jostle and move around and negotiate and stuff. The way the primary process works is the party at large determines when the states will have their primary. If they deviate from that without explicit permission, as most of the states in the primaries have, then it's a problem. They are potentially in violation to the point where their delegates cannot be seated. That is, the superdelegates allocated are fine. The delegates actually voting in the primary become useless. You could have a situation where Joe Biden technically, assuming there's a convention at all, and that's also up in the air because it's all sorts of fucked up due to the coronavirus, could become nominee, but he's a zombie nominee because he never technically clinched the delegate total because there aren't enough delegates to clinch. Or it has to go to a second ballot, in which case the DNC will literally have to hastily rewrite its rules 2012 GOP style. Remember the Ron Paul revolution? Remember when they very, very hastily decided to change things in the last few days of it to try to keep Ron Paul from being too big of a show at the convention? They wouldn't seat some of his delegates. They bust him around the venue over and over to keep him from voting, for instance, because they didn't want any voting protests. They didn't want people to shout out in dissent at Mitt Romney being the nominee. That's what they did also a little bit with Clinton, and they're doing it now with Biden. Technically speaking, under the current DNC rules, if Biden has not clinched the delegate total, it goes to a second ballot in which all of the delegates are released, and Bernie Sanders and all of these others will be able to make a speech and mill around and try to convince people to support them. This would be anarchy, because even though I have a feeling more pledged Bernie delegates would probably shift to Biden than in the other direction, it would look really, really bad for Joe Biden if he can't technically just be nominee, when he technically put away the race not long after Super Tuesday. He is officially, legitimately the nominee, and more than half of the party does want him to be nominee. But that's some legendarily low enthusiasm and support. The vote blue no matter who crowd like to browbeat all of the other people in the party and say, well, it doesn't matter if you don't like Joe Biden. It doesn't matter if you disagree with Joe Biden on every meaningful issue you care about. You should still vote for him because Drumpfler. That's a recipe, by the way, for disaster. Not allowing in-party dissent and negotiation for platforms is why the Democrats are fucked right now. You have a DNC that solidly sticks to its neoliberal plan and budges not one bit and forces its candidate down people's throats. The Bernie bros don't get much of what they want. At most, they get limited UBI as a proposal at this point. And that, I'm sure, is very happy news to the Yang Gang, although it's completely different in some ways. Doesn't Elon Omar want to make it like race-based or something like that, if I remember correctly? You get all sorts of stupid rider proposals. The Warren fans, they want a female nominee, and they're not necessarily going to be taken in by the I will have a female running mate bullshit of Biden. Female running mate. So again, you want to make the first female president. It's just that she won't be an elected official. She'll have been appointed to that position because she was there when you resigned or croaked. You're a 78-year-old dude who's had several brain aneurysms and clearly has early stage dementia. You will not last an entire term. This is also another prediction. Let's say that Biden wins, and I don't think that he will. I think it's a 90% chance Trump is reelected at this point. If Biden is elected, I give a 90% chance he doesn't finish out his term because I think he'll end up resigning. I think his dementia will progress to the point where he's unable to sort of do it. He'll become more and more of an absentee. It'll become more and more shiningly obvious to people that he's not running the country, that his VP is. And he will be forced by the Democrats in the end to step down. They will tell him to get the fuck out and allow the VP to take over because they don't want that dead weight going into an election where they will have a demented incumbent incapable of campaigning. It would be political suicide. They'll force him out, and the cabal that actually runs things will be more transparent than ever. The last time it was that transparent was right after 9/11 when we started hearing about our shadow government that nobody elected, but don't worry, they're waiting in the wings to save us in case nuclear Armageddon happens. And everyone was all freaked out, as right, by the way, they should be. Everyone would be even more freaked out about Joe Biden if he gets elected. Again, with that level of in-party enthusiasm, I doubt that that will happen. Then you have, at the other end of the spectrum, you have people who are so ideologically fanatic that they're sort of like, don't vote blue unless our guy happens to be the nominee, like without any sense of negotiation or strategy. And that's also a losing proposition. You have to have malleability and principles. The DNC has no malleability. The burnouts and so forth, they've got these strong principles, but they're totally unbending. The DNC is not exactly principled, although they have their central platforms. It's an insane sort of thing. The GOP doesn't have this problem. There's no longer any meaningful anti-Trump movement. Look, Trump can literally roast Mitt Romney on Twitter, calling him a loser repeatedly as a campaign strategy. Nobody does a goddamn fucking thing about it. Have you noticed this? Did you notice the other day when Trump made basically a campaign ad comparing himself favorably with loser Romney? And it was basically a mashup of Romney losing and Trump winning, and how funny it was to Trump. And that was literally, the tweet was loser. Was there any response? If he had done that a couple of years ago, Mitch McConnell would have jumped down his throat and been talking about decorum. Well, we need to hold rank. We need decorum within the party. John Cornyn would be calling him out. Rand Paul might even call him out at that point, although he'd probably have a little bit of a Festivus chuckle over it. Nobody even responds. They've come to love it. How they've learned to love the bomb that is Trump, who came into the GOP, exploded, burned everything to the ground, and then suddenly rebuilt it with a big fat Trump logo on the front. And that's the GOP. They don't have any problem with dissent. Nobody's dissenting against Trump. They've got the marginal libertarians on their side with Rand, specifically as a figurehead. They've got the McConnellite sort of neocon stratagem Republicans aboard. The business Dems have all fled the Democratic Party. They're aboard. They've become Trump Democrats, essentially. He's got no fucking problems. It doesn't matter if his approval's only 46. He's ahead of where Obama was. There's a reason. Look at who his opponent is. His opponent's nuts. Literally demented. Oh, this is the best election. It's going to be great. That's about all. Peace out.